The smell of fried onions and old coffee hung heavy in the air, a thick blanket that seemed to coat everything in the small diner. It was the kind of place where the windows were always slightly sticky, no matter how many times they were cleaned, and the noise level never dropped below a dull roar. For the young woman working the floor, this was just background noise, the soundtrack of her survival. We will call her Anna. She wasn't here to make friends or find adventure, she was here to work. Anna moved through the narrow aisles between the booths with practiced efficiency. She was 24, though her eyes looked older today. She held a pot of decaf in one hand and a stack of dirty plates in the other, balancing them with a grace that came from doing the same thing, day in and day out, for far too long. Her uniform was a pale blue that had faded to a dull gray after hundreds of washes. The hem was fraying slightly at the sleeve, a small detail she noticed every time she reached out to pour coffee, but she didn't have the money to fix it. She just kept moving. Her feet ached. It was a constant, throbbing pain that started in her heels and shot all the way up to her calves. She thought about buying new insoles for her sneakers, the cheap ones they sold at the pharmacy down the street, but then she looked at her bills. Rent was due in 3 days. The insoles would have to wait. She walked past table 4, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can I get a refill?" Han, an older man, asked. He was a regular, always sitting in the same spot, always reading the same newspaper. "You sure can," Anna said, her voice sounding cheerful even though she felt exhausted. She poured the coffee, the dark liquid swirling into the white ceramic cup. "Anything else? Maybe a slice of pie? The apple is fresh today." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "You're a good kid, Anna. Always trying to upsell me." "Gotta pay the rent, right?" she said lightly. He nodded, his expression softening. He knew. They all knew. The regulars saw the dark circles under her eyes and the way she rubbed her lower back when she thought no one was looking. This was a hard life, serving people who were often rude, messy, or ungrateful, but Anna did it because she had to. She had dreams once, big ones that felt like they belonged to a different person, but life had a way of grinding those dreams down until they were just dust. She walked back toward the kitchen, swinging the heavy door open with her hip. The heat hit her face instantly. The cook, a large man named Dave, was sweating over the grill, flipping burgers with a speed that was almost violent. "Order up, table 7. Dave shouted, slapping a plate down on the metal counter. Anna grabbed the plate, checking it quickly. "Double cheeseburger, no pickles, extra fries." It looked right. She grabbed the ketchup bottles and headed back out. The lunch rush was starting to build. The chatter in the room grew louder, a mix of clattering silverware, scraping chairs, and loud conversations about business, sports, and gossip. It was a chaotic symphony, and Anna was just one of the instruments, trying to stay in tune. Her eyes drifted across the room, past the crowded tables and the families with crying children, to the far corner. It was the quietest spot in the diner, tucked away from the main flow of traffic. That was where the piano sat. It was a beautiful instrument, or at least, it used to be. It was an upright, grand, dark, and imposing, but now it looked tired. The finish was scratched and dull from years of exposure to the greasy air. Potted sativas sat on top of it, their leaves drooping slightly, begging for water. But to Anna, it was still the most beautiful thing in the room. She remembered when she was little, before her world fell apart. She remembered the sound of real music, the way it felt to press her fingers down on the ivory keys and create something that wasn't just noise. Her mother had played. Not in a diner like this, but in their small living room, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Those memories hurt now, sharp and jagged, so she tried not to look at the piano too often. But every morning, when she came in for her shift, she would walk over to that corner. She did it today, just after she clocked in. She took a clean cloth from her apron pocket and sprayed a little polish on the wood. She wiped it down gently, removing the fingerprints from the day before. She was careful around the keys. She never touched them with her bare hands. It felt like breaking a rule, like waking a sleeping giant that should stay asleep. She just wanted to keep it clean. It was a small act of respect, a silent nod to the life she used to have. A group of teenagers came in, loud and laughing, shoving each other as they found a large booth. Anna sighed, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear, and headed over to them. The moment of quiet reflection was over. It was time to be the waitress again. "Hi guys, welcome in," she said, pulling out her order pad. "What can I get started for you?" They looked at the menu, arguing over who was paying for the appetizers. Anna stood there patiently, shifting her weight from one sore foot to the other. She listened to them talk about things that seemed so far away from her reality: college applications, new cars, weekend trips to the lake. She didn't envy them, exactly. She just felt a long way away from them. She took their orders, a mess of nachos and sodas, and walked back to the counter. As she punched the buttons on the computer screen, she caught her reflection in the darkened window by the kitchen door. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail to keep it out of the food, and a few loose wisps framed her face. She wondered if her mother would recognize her now. Her mom always said she had music in her soul. Anna didn't feel like she had music in her soul anymore. She felt like she had coffee stains and sore feet. The bell above the front door jingled, signaling a new customer. Anna didn't look up immediately. She was busy organizing the silverware, making sure the forks were separated from the spoons. But the vibe in the room shifted. It was subtle, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. The noise level didn't go down, but the tone of it changed. People stopped looking at their food and started looking toward the entrance. Anna felt a prickle on the back of her neck, an instinctual warning that something was different. She finished rolling the silverware in a napkin and turned around. Standing just inside the glass doors was a man who looked like he had walked into the wrong building by mistake. He was wearing a suit that looked sharp and expensive, the kind of tailoring you usually only saw in business magazines or on TV. He was checking his watch, looking annoyed, and tapping one shiny leather shoe against the floor. He held himself very straight, radiating a kind of cold energy that made the warm, greasy air of the diner feel inadequate. He wasn't a regular. He wasn't looking for the 2-for-1 burger special. He looked like a man who was used to getting exactly what he wanted, exactly when he wanted it. He scanned the room with a critical eye, his gaze sweeping over the decorations, the floor, and the people, as if he were grading them on a test they hadn't studied for. Anna watched him for a second. She knew that look. She had served plenty of people who thought they were better than this place, but this man was different. There was a hardness to him, a lack of patience in the set of his jaw. He wasn't just a customer, he was a challenge. He started walking toward the back, moving with a purpose that parted the sea of tables. He didn't wait for someone to seat him. He just walked. Anna took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and stepped into his path. She put on her customer service face, the mask she wore to hide her frustration. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady. "Table for one." The man stopped. He looked at her, but he didn't really see her. He looked through her, like she was a mannequin or a piece of furniture. He didn't smile. He just nodded once, a short, sharp jerk of his chin. "Yes," he said. His voice was smooth but commanding. "Somewhere quiet. And clean." "Right this way," Anna said. She led him toward the booths along the wall, away from the noisy teenagers. She could feel him following her, close behind, his presence filling the space. She stopped at a table that had just been cleared. It was in a decent spot, relatively clean with a view of the street. "Here you go, sir. The menus are right here." She pulled out a chair for him, trying to be polite. The man didn't sit immediately. He looked at the table, then he ran a finger along the edge of it. He inspected his fingertip, as if checking for dust. Anna felt a flush of irritation rise in her chest. The tables were clean. She wiped them herself. "Water," he said, finally sitting down and placing a leather briefcase on the seat next to him. "With lemon. And no ice." "I'll get that right away for you," Anna said, keeping her voice level. She turned to walk away, already mentally calculating how fast she could get the lemon. "Wait," he said. Anna paused and turned back around. "Yes, sir." The man wasn't looking at the menu. He was looking past her, toward the back corner of the diner. His eyes narrowed slightly, a spark of interest lighting up his cold face. He was looking at the piano. Anna didn't know why she felt a sudden chill run down her spine, but she did. The man's gaze wasn't just casual curiosity, it was the look of a predator spotting something vulnerable in the grass. He stared at the dusty upright piano in the corner, his eyes slightly narrowed, as if he were calculating its value or deciding if it was worth his time. "I'll get your water," Anna repeated, trying to pull his attention back to the table. She needed him to focus on ordering food so she could do her job and move on. The less time she spent in his orbit, the better she felt. The man blinked, breaking his stare, and turned his cold eyes back to her. "Don't be long," he said, waving his hand dismissively. Anna hurried away to the drink station. Her hands moved automatically, grabbing a glass, scooping ice. "Wait," he said. "No ice." She dumped the ice back into the bin and refilled the glass with just water and a slice of lemon. As she worked, she could feel the tension in the room shifting. The other diners, the regulars who knew the comfortable rhythm of the diner, were glancing toward the back booth. The man stood out like a sore thumb. His expensive suit was crisp and clean, smelling faintly of cologne that cut through the smell of bacon and coffee. He checked his watch, then tapped his fingers on the table. Tap, tap, tap. It was an impatient rhythm, demanding speed. She brought the water back, setting it down gently on a coaster. "Here you are, sir. Are you ready to order, or do you need a few minutes?" The man didn't look at the water. He didn't look at the menu. He leaned back, draping one arm over the booth, making himself take up as much space as possible. "I'm ready," he said. "I'll have the steak. Medium rare. And I want fresh vegetables, not whatever frozen mush you usually serve. If they're soft, I'm sending it back." Anna nodded, forcing her professional mask to stay in place. "I can make a note of that. Which vegetables would you prefer?" "Whatever is green," he said vaguely. "And a coffee?" "Black. Coming right up." She scribbled on her pad, careful to write fresh veg in big letters so Dave would see it. When she looked up, the man was smiling, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile a cat gives to a mouse before it pounces. "You know," he said, his voice loud enough that the booth next to them quieted down, "it's depressing to see such a fine instrument rotting in a corner like that." Anna paused, her pen hovering over the paper. She didn't want to have a conversation with him. She just wanted to turn in the order. "It's an old piano, sir. It's mostly for decoration now." "Decoration?" he scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. "That is a waste of craftsmanship. It belongs in a concert hall, not a grease pit." He gestured around the room with a look of mild disgust. "But I suppose this is all this place is good for." The comment hung in the air, insulting not just the diner, but everyone in it, including Anna. She felt the familiar heat of embarrassment flush her cheeks. She worked hard here. It wasn't a palace, but it was honest work. She wanted to snap back at him, to tell him that if he didn't like it, he could leave, but the image of her unpaid bills flashed in her mind. She couldn't risk a scene. She couldn't lose this job. "I'll let the kitchen know about your order," she said politely, turning to leave. He didn't stop her this time. He picked up his phone and began to scroll, ignoring her completely, as if she had ceased to exist the moment she stopped being useful. Anna walked into the kitchen, the heavy door swinging shut behind her, cutting off the noise of the dining room. She leaned against the metal counter for a second, letting out a long breath. Dave looked up from the grill, a spatula in his hand. "Tough table?" Dave asked, his gruff voice showing a hint of sympathy. "Guy in the suit," Anna said, pinning the ticket to the wheel. "Wants a steak, medium rare, fresh veggies. Said he'd send it back if they're mushy." Dave rolled his eyes. "I'll give him fresh veggies. Crisp enough to snap. Who does he think he is, coming in here and acting like he owns the place? He's just hungry, Dave. Just make it good." "Always do," Dave grunted, tossing a steak onto the sizzling grill. Anna busied herself making the coffee, watching the dark liquid drip into the pot. She tried to calm down. She knew people like that existed. People who thought the world was built just to serve them. She usually let it roll off her back like water off a duck. But today, it felt heavier. Maybe it was because he had noticed the piano. That piano was her secret sanctuary, even if she never played it. Hearing him call it junk felt personal. She waited for the coffee to finish brewing, watching the steam rise. The minutes ticked by. The lunch rush was in full swing, so she had to run drinks to other tables, refill ketchup bottles, and clear away dirty dishes. She kept an eye on the back booth, though. The man was sitting alone, still looking at his phone, ignoring the water. He seemed bored, restless. He was a man who needed constant entertainment, and waiting for food was clearly beneath him. Finally, the coffee was ready. She poured a fresh cup, black as ink, and grabbed the steak plate Dave had slid under the heat lamp. The vegetables looked perfect: bright green broccoli and carrots, steamed but still firm. The steak rested in the center, juicy and seared to a perfect brown. It looked delicious. She carried the plate and the coffee out to the dining room. As she approached the booth, the man looked up. He checked his watch again, frowning. "Took long enough," he muttered. "I apologize for the wait, sir. Here is your steak." She set the plate down carefully. She stepped back, waiting to see if he would approve. He picked up his fork and knife, slicing into the meat. He examined the color, then put a small piece in his mouth. He chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. Anna held her breath. If he sent it back, it would come out of her paycheck. It wasn't fair, but that was how the owner did things. He swallowed. He poked at a broccoli floret. Passable, he said finally. For now. He took a sip of coffee and made a face. Bitter. But it will do. Anna let out a silent breath of relief. Is there anything else I can get you? The man cut another piece of steak, but he didn't eat it. He looked over Anna's shoulder again, toward the piano. A thought seemed to cross his mind. He looked back at Anna, his eyes calculating. He saw the stain on her apron, the tired posture, the worn shoes. He saw a service person, someone he considered beneath him. You know, he said, swirling his coffee in the cup, I'm hosting a small event next week at my hotel. A charity gala. We need some background music. Something, classy, but quiet. That sounds nice, Anna said, shifting her weight. She wanted to go check on table 7. Yes, it is, he continued, setting the cup down with a sharp clink. I hate hiring professionals. They're always so full of themselves. Always demanding breaks and demanding high fees. It's annoying. He looked at Anna, a cruel glint in his eye. I bet someone like you could use the extra cash. Waitresses never make enough, do they? I do okay, sir, Anna said, feeling defensive. She didn't like where this was going. Sure you do, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But I bet you play that thing, don't you? Anna froze. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. I told you, sir. It's just decoration. I don't play. He laughed. It wasn't a warm, joyful sound. It was a short, barking laugh that mocked her. Don't lie to me, girl. I've seen how you look at it. I saw you wiping it down earlier like it was a holy shrine. You clean it, you stare at it, but you expect me to believe you don't touch the keys. That is the rule, Anna said, her voice starting to tremble just slightly. We aren't allowed to play while on the clock. Forget the rules, he snapped. I'm a customer. And I'm asking you to play. I really can't, Anna said, taking a small step back. I have other tables to serve. She turned to leave, desperate to escape the conversation. But the man wasn't done. He wasn't used to hearing the word no. He reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was firm, his hand warm and dry. He didn't hurt her, but he held her tight enough so she couldn't walk away. Anna stopped cold. The diner went silent around them. The people in the next booth stopped eating. The man at the counter turned around. Everyone felt the sudden tension. It was the kind of moment that makes everyone hold their breath. Look at me, the man said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the polite customer tone and revealing the steel underneath. Anna turned her head slowly. She looked into his eyes. They were cold, devoid of empathy. I didn't come here to eat burnt steak and listen to excuses, he said softly. I came here to be entertained. And I see an instrument and a girl who clearly has nothing better to offer than filling water glasses. Please let go of me, Anna whispered. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she thought he might be able to hear it. I will let go when you agree to play, he said. Or, we can call your manager over. I can tell him how rude you've been. I can tell him I saw you touching the food without gloves. I can tell him I'll leave a 1-star review online. Do you think this place can afford bad reviews? He squeezed her wrist slightly, emphasizing the threat. He knew he had her. He knew she was scared to lose her job. He could see the fear in her eyes, and it fed his ego. "One song," he said. "Just play me one little song. Show me you're good for something other than cleaning up messes. If you do that, I'll leave a generous tip. If you don't, well, I can make things very difficult for you." He released her wrist, leaning back in the booth with a smug satisfaction on his face. He folded his arms across his chest, waiting. He had backed her into a corner, and he knew it. He was enjoying this. He enjoyed breaking people down just to see what they were made of. Anna rubbed her wrist, where his fingers had left a red mark. She looked around the diner. The other customers were watching. Some looked sympathetic, but no one moved. No one spoke up. They were all afraid of making a scene, too. She was alone. She looked at the man, sitting there in his expensive suit, waiting for his show. He saw her as a toy, a puppet to dance for his amusement. The anger bubbled up inside her, hot and fierce, fighting against the fear. She wanted to throw the water in his face. She wanted to scream at him to get out. But then she looked at the piano. It sat in the corner, silent and waiting. It had been 3 years since she had played. 3 years since she had promised herself she would never touch a keyboard again, because the pain of remembering was too much. She had locked that part of her away to survive. "Well," the man prompted, raising his eyebrows. "I don't have all day." Anna took a shaky breath. Her hands were trembling. She looked at the exit, then back at the man. She thought about the rent. She thought about Dave in the kitchen. She thought about the silence that lived inside her. She didn't say a word. She just turned slowly and began to walk toward the piano. The walk to the corner of the diner felt like the longest walk of her life. It was only maybe 20 steps, a short distance between the regular tables and the back wall, but for Anna, it felt like walking to the edge of a cliff. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear a rushing sound in her ears, drowning out the clatter of silverware and the low murmur of conversations. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, watching the scuffed linoleum tiles pass beneath her worn sneakers. She didn't want to see the faces of the customers. She didn't want to see their pity or their curiosity. She could feel the man's eyes burning into her back. He was watching, waiting, like a hawk circling its prey. He expected her to fail. He expected her to embarrass herself so he could have a good laugh at her expense. It made her feel sick to her stomach, but her feet kept moving. She had no choice. He held her job in the palm of his hand, and as scared as she was more terrified of losing her income. The rent was due, and the refrigerator at home was empty. Survival was a powerful motivator, stronger than pride. When she finally reached the piano, she stopped and stood in front of it for a moment. It looked different from this angle. Usually, she stood over it with a cleaning rag, looking down at it like it was a piece of furniture. Now, she was looking at it as a musician. The dust on the lid seemed to glow in the afternoon light coming through the window. The potted plants on top looked dry and thirsty. Anna reached out and gently moved the plants to the floor. She set them down carefully, one by one. It was a way to stall, a way to delay the inevitable for just a few more seconds. She wiped her hands on her apron, but her palms were sweaty. She felt a drop of sweat roll down her temple. She turned around and looked at the man. He was still sitting in the booth, his arms crossed over his chest, a smug grin plastered on his face. He raised his eyebrows, as if to say, "Well, I'm waiting." Anna turned back to the piano. She pulled the bench out. It made a scraping sound against the floor, loud and jarring in the quiet room. She sat down. The bench was hard and uncomfortable. It felt too low. She adjusted her posture, straightening her spine, just like her mother had taught her all those years ago. She lifted her hands and placed them on the keys. They were cold and smooth to the touch. Her fingers hovered over the ivory, trembling slightly. She took a deep, shaky breath and tried to steady herself. She closed her eyes for a moment. She tried to push away the fear, the humiliation, and the sound of the man's voice. She tried to push away the smell of the diner and the feeling of everyone staring at her. She needed to find a quiet place in her mind. She thought about the music room in her childhood home. She remembered the way the sun used to come in through the curtains in the late afternoon, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. She remembered the smell of her mother's perfume and the sound of her soft voice encouraging her. Music is a feeling, not a task, her mother used to say. You have to let it come from inside you. Anna opened her eyes. The diner came back into focus. The man was checking his watch, looking bored already. He whispered something to himself, maybe a comment about how long this was taking. He had no idea what he was asking her to do. He thought he was just forcing a waitress to perform a trick like a monkey. He didn't know that by asking her to play, he was asking her to open a door she had nailed shut 3 years ago. She pressed down a key. A single note rang out. It was a C, clear and resonant. It sounded surprisingly good for a piano that hadn't been tuned in years. The note hung in the air for a moment, silencing the table closest to her. She pressed another key. Then another. She wasn't playing a song yet, just testing the sound, getting a feel for the instrument. The action was stiff, and the keys resisted her fingers slightly, but they responded. She ran a scale up the keyboard, her fingers stumbling a little on the higher notes. It felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like meeting an old friend you haven't seen in years and realizing you don't know what to say to them. That's not a song, the man's voice boomed across the room. Several people jumped. He didn't yell, but his voice was sharp and commanding. Play something real. Entertain me. Anna flinched. Her fingers froze on the keys. The humiliation washed over her again, hot and prickly. She looked down at her hands. They were the hands of a waitress, dry, red from washing dishes, with a small cut on her thumb from a broken glass earlier that morning. They weren't the hands of a concert pianist anymore. She felt a surge of anger. It started small, a little spark in her chest, but it grew quickly. Who was this man to talk to her like that? Who was he to demand anything from her? He didn't know her. He didn't know what she had lost. He just saw a uniform and assumed she was worthless. She looked at the keyboard again. She thought about the piece her mother loved the most. It was a complex piece, full of sorrow and beauty. It was a piece that required everything you had: emotion, technique, and soul. She had played it at her mother's funeral. She hadn't played it since. Her hands began to move on their own. Muscle memory took over. Her fingers found the starting chords. She took a deep breath and pushed down on the keys. The sound that filled the room wasn't loud, but it was commanding. It was a deep, rich harmony that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. The chatter in the diner didn't stop all at once. It happened in waves. The people closest to the piano stopped talking first. They turned in their seats to look. Then, the melody began to unfold. It was slow and heavy, pouring out of the old instrument like water from a broken dam. Anna's fingers moved faster, finding the rhythm they had missed for so long. It was clumsy at first, a little rusty, but then the music took over. The awkwardness vanished, replaced by a raw, powerful energy. The man in the booth looked up, his smug smile faltering. He took a sip of his coffee, but his hand paused halfway to his mouth. He set the cup down harder than he intended, the coffee sloshing over the side. He hadn't expected this. He expected a childish tune, something simple and poorly played. He was prepared to laugh, to roll his eyes, and to complain about the noise. But this was different. This was real music. Anna didn't look at him anymore. She didn't look at anyone. She closed her eyes again and let herself get lost in the notes. The pain that she had been carrying around for 3 years, the heavy, suffocating weight of grief, suddenly had a place to go. It poured out of her fingers and into the keys. She wasn't just a waitress in a blue uniform anymore. In this moment, she was an artist. She was a daughter remembering her mother. The music swelled, filling every corner of the small diner. It soared above the smell of fried food and coffee. It cut through the tension and the awkwardness. It was a sound that demanded respect. The teenagers in the large booth stopped laughing. They put down their phones and listened. The old man with the newspaper lowered the paper, a look of pure wonder on his face. Even the cooks in the kitchen, who usually ignored everything except the orders, stopped what they were doing. Dave leaned out of the pass-through window, wiping his hands on his apron, staring open-mouthed at the back of the girl he had worked with for 6 months but never really knew. The room grew completely silent. The only sound was the music. It was a rare thing for a public place to be so quiet. It was as if the entire world had stopped to listen to this girl and her old piano. Anna played on. She didn't hold back. She let the sadness and the anger and the love flow through her. She hit the keys harder, her hands dancing across the ivory with a strength she didn't know she still possessed. The physical pain in her feet and her back faded away, replaced by the only kind of relief she had ever known. The man in the expensive suit sat frozen. He looked at the woman playing the piano, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she leaned into the music, the total surrender to the moment. He realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that he had made a terrible mistake. He had tried to humiliate someone who possessed a greatness he could never understand. He had picked a fight with a ghost and was losing. The music reached a climax, a cascading series of notes that sounded like rain falling on a tin roof, loud and chaotic and beautiful. Then, slowly, it began to quiet down. The tempo slowed. The melody softened, becoming gentle and whisper-like. Anna's hand slowed down, her fingers lingering on the keys, squeezing the last bit of emotion out of the instrument. Finally, she played the final chord. She let her hands rest on the keys, letting the sound fade into silence until there was nothing left but the ringing in the air. She sat there for a moment, her chest heaving, her hands shaking slightly. She was afraid to open her eyes. She was afraid to turn around and see the looks on their faces. She felt exposed, like she had taken off her skin and showed them everything underneath. The silence stretched out. It wasn't an awkward silence anymore. It was a heavy, awestruck silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The man in the suit sat very still, his coffee spilling onto the table, completely forgotten. The spell was broken, but the magic remained. The silence that followed the final note was heavy, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence of before. It was a charged, electric quiet that buzzed in the air like a live wire. Anna sat frozen on the bench, her hands still resting lightly on the keys. Her chest was rising and falling rapidly, her breath coming in short gasps as if she had just sprinted a mile. For a long moment, she kept her eyes squeezed shut. She was terrified to open them. She felt stripped bare, as if the music had peeled away her uniform and her skin, leaving her soul exposed to the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner. She expected laughter. She expected a sneer, a rude comment, or the sound of a fork clattering against a plate as people went back to their meals. She was so used to being ignored or ridiculed in this place that her mind couldn't accept anything else. She waited for the bubble to burst, for the man in the suit to say something cutting to bring her back down to the ground where she belonged. But then, a single sound broke the quiet. It was the sound of someone swallowing hard, a nervous gulp from the direction of the kitchen passed through. Slowly, reluctantly, Anna opened her eyes. The world looked different. The colors seemed brighter, the edges sharper. She looked up and saw the faces of the customers. The teenagers in the large booth were no longer laughing or scrolling through their phones. They were staring at her, their mouths slightly open, their fries forgotten on their plates. The old man with the newspaper had lowered it completely, his reading glasses sliding down his nose as he gazed at the back corner with wet, shining eyes. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The adrenaline that had fueled her performance was fading, leaving her limbs feeling weak and shaky. She slowly pulled her hands away from the keys, as if the piano had suddenly become hot to the touch. She placed them in her lap, clutching her apron to stop them from trembling. Then, without thinking, she turned her head to look at the man in the booth. He was staring, too. But his expression wasn't one of awe or appreciation. It was a look of complete and utter confusion. His jaw was slack, his eyebrows drawn together in tight furrows. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, or perhaps a man who had realized he had made a catastrophic mistake. The smug arrogance had been wiped clean from his face, replaced by a pale, blank shock. His coffee cup was still tipped over, the dark liquid forming a puddle on the table and dripping onto the pristine fabric of his suit sleeve, but he didn't even notice. The spell held for a few seconds more. Then, the cook in the kitchen, a big burly man named Dave who had seen just about everything in his 20 years of flipping burgers, started to clap. It was just a slow, rhythmic clap at first. Clap. 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 The sound seemed to wake everyone up. The old man by the window joined in, tapping his hand on the table. Then the teenagers. Then the couple in the corner who had been arguing about their bill 5 minutes ago. The applause swelled, filling the small diner. It wasn't the polite, obligatory clapping you hear at a boring school play. It was loud, enthusiastic, and genuine. It was a roar of appreciation that bounced off the walls and the ceiling. Anna felt her face burn hot. She stood up from the bench so quickly she almost tripped over her own feet. She couldn't handle this. She didn't know how to receive praise. She was used to being invisible, to being the person who cleared the plates, not the person who was applauded. The attention felt like a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders. She turned away from the room, looking for an escape route. She saw the hallway that led to the restrooms and the back exit. She needed to hide. She needed to breathe. She began to walk quickly toward the hallway, keeping her head down, dodging the outstretched hands of customers who wanted to pat her on the back or touch her arm. Incredible, she heard the old man whisper as she passed him. Absolutely incredible. That was amazing, girl. One of the teenagers shouted. Anna just nodded, forcing a tight, terrified smile, and kept moving. She felt like she was fleeing a crime scene, but the crime was that she had let them see who she really was. She pushed through the swinging door that led to the back hallway and leaned against the cold brick wall, closing her eyes. She could still hear the applause from the dining room, muffled now but persistent. She took deep, ragged breaths. Her hands were vibrating. She looked down at them, turning them over, staring at her palms. They were the same hands that had scrubbed floors and carried heavy trays. But they had done something else today. Something she had promised herself she would never do again. She thought about her mother. The last image she had of her mom was in a hospital bed, pale and weak, but still smiling when Anna had played a song for her on a portable keyboard. "Don't stop playing, Anna," her mother had whispered. "It's the light inside you. Don't let it go out." But Anna had let it go out. She had buried it under grief and necessity. She had convinced herself that the light was gone, that she was just a waitress now, just a worker bee with no purpose other than to survive. But the music had been there. It had been waiting. It had rushed out of her the moment she touched the keys, intense and powerful, undimmed by the years of silence. And the way people had reacted, it wasn't just because the song was pretty. It was because it was real. It was raw emotion, unpolished and honest, in a world that was often fake and cold. Anna wiped a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. She wasn't sad, exactly. She was overwhelmed. It felt like a dam had broken inside her, and she didn't know how to stop the flood. Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open. Dave stepped into the hallway. He was a giant of a man, usually covered in grease and looking grumpy, but right now he looked different. He looked proud. "I heard it, Anna," he said, his voice unusually soft. "I heard it through the order window." Anna looked up at him, sniffing. I didn't mean to make a scene, Dave. I'm sorry if I disturbed the kitchen." Dave shook his head, cutting her off. "Disturb us, everyone stopped cooking, Anna." The line stopped. "We just listened. I've worked here a long time, and nobody has ever made this place feel like that. You got a gift, kid. A real gift." "I don't know if I can do it again," Anna whispered. Dave shrugged. "Maybe you don't need to do it again. But you did it today. And you need to know that what you did out there, it mattered." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slightly crumpled handkerchief, offering it to her. "Now, dry your eyes. You got a job to finish." Anna took the handkerchief, grateful for the rough texture against her skin. "Thanks, Dave." "Don't mention it," he grunted, turning back to the kitchen. "And hey, that suit guy, he looks like he swallowed a bug. Don't let him get to you." Anna managed a small, genuine smile. "I'll try." She took a few more minutes to compose herself, splashing some cold water on her face from the sink in the restroom and fixing her ponytail. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the same tired waitress who had walked in at the start of her shift. Her eyes were still red, but they looked brighter. Alive. She knew she couldn't hide in the back forever. The lunch rush wasn't over, and there were tables to clear. She took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and walked back into the dining room. The applause had died down, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The noise level was lower, the conversations more hushed and respectful. As she walked past tables, people stopped talking to look at her. Some smiled. Some nodded. It was like she had earned their respect in a way that serving 1,000 cheeseburgers never could. She felt a new kind of confidence in her step. She walked over to the table where the teenagers sat and started clearing their plates. "That was awesome," one of the girls said, looking up from her phone. Are you, like, a professional or something? Anna paused, stacking the plates. I used to play, she said simply. A long time ago. Well, you should play more, the girl insisted. You were better than the band we saw last weekend. Thanks, Anna said, and for the first time, she really meant it. She collected the rest of the dishes and headed toward the back booth. The hardest part was still ahead of her. She had to face the man. She had to clean up his spilled coffee and ask if he wanted his check. As she approached, she saw that he hadn't moved. He was sitting in the exact same position, staring at the piano, his food untouched. The puddle of coffee had soaked into his sleeve, leaving a dark stain. He looked smaller somehow. The intimidating aura that had filled the room when he walked in was completely gone. Anna walked up to the table. She didn't say, "Can I get you anything else?" or "How was the steak?" She just stood there, waiting for him to acknowledge her. Slowly, he turned his head. His eyes met hers. There was no arrogance left in them. There was only a hollow emptiness, a look of a man who had been thoroughly defeated. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. For the first time in his life, perhaps, he didn't know what to say. The silence between them stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable, but this time, Anna wasn't afraid. She was the one in control now. She held the towel in her hand, ready to clean up his mess. The man stared at the dark stain spreading across his expensive sleeve, but he made no move to blot it. The coffee was sticky and cooling rapidly, much like the tension in the air, which had shifted from electric to heavy. He seemed to have forgotten about the mess entirely. His eyes, once sharp and critical, were now fixed on the empty keys of the piano in the corner. Anna waited. She stood by the table with a clean white cloth in her hand, ready to wipe up the spill, but she didn't move. She watched him. It was strange, but for the first time since he walked in, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like a servant who had to scramble to please him. The music had changed the air between them. She had given them something real, and in return, she had taken away his power to intimidate her. Finally, the man stirred. He looked up at her, his expression complicated. It was a mix of confusion, shame, and a strange kind of wonder. "I didn't expect that," he said quietly. His voice lacked the harsh bark from before. It sounded almost normal. Anna remained still. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. "I'm sorry about the disruption, sir. I'll get your check." She turned to leave, wanting to put an end to the interaction. "Wait," he said. It wasn't a command this time. It was a request. "Please." Anna paused and turned back around. The man let out a long, shaky breath. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up slightly. "I come here often. Well, not here specifically, but places like this. I don't know what I look for. Maybe I just look for things that don't work. Things that are broken." He looked down at his uneaten steak. "I thought the piano was junk. I thought you were just someone who didn't matter. I thought I could force a reaction, get a laugh out of making someone uncomfortable." He stopped, shaking his head. "I was wrong. I was incredibly wrong." Anna felt the anger that had been burning inside her begin to cool down. She saw him differently now, not as a monster, but as a lonely, unhappy man who got his kicks from pushing people around because he couldn't find joy anywhere else. "I used to play a long time ago," Anna said, her voice steady. I stopped because life got hard. You can't just force music out of someone like it's a trick. It's not a performance you can order off a menu. I see that now, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. He opened it and took out a stack of bills. He didn't count them. He just placed them on the table, next to the spilled coffee. This is for you, he said. Not for the food. For the song. Anna looked at the money. It was more than she made in a month. It would cover the rent, the bills, and maybe even leave enough for new shoes. It was a lifeline. But looking at it, and then at the man's defeated face, she felt a strange reluctance to take it. Taking the money felt like accepting his idea that she was an entertainer who could be bought. She sighed softly and reached out. She picked up the bills, but she didn't put them in her pocket. She placed them in the man's hand, closing his fingers over them. The man looked at her, utterly baffled. What are you doing? Keep it, Anna said. You're refusing a tip. He sounded like he had never heard of such a thing in his life. I'm not refusing the tip, Anna said gently. I'm refusing to sell you that memory. That wasn't for sale. My mother taught me that song. She loved it. I played it because you pushed me, yes, but I played it for her, not for you. And you don't pay for that. The man sat there, stunned. He looked at the money in his hand, then up at the young woman in the faded blue uniform. He looked at the piano, then back at her. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, humility. I am truly sorry, he whispered. For how I treated you. I was a bully. I was cruel. Anna nodded. Yes, you were. But we all have bad days. Just, maybe next time, try to find the light in things instead of looking for the dirt. She picked up her cleaning cloth. Let me get this coffee for you. She leaned over and wiped the table, soaking up the dark liquid. The man watched her work. He didn't check his watch. He didn't tap his fingers. He just watched her with a look of genuine respect. When the table was clean, Anna stood up. Is there anything else, sir? No, he said. Nothing else. She walked away to process his payment at the register. The diner was still buzzing, the conversations low and excited. People were still glancing at her, smiling, nodding. The atmosphere had completely transformed. The diner wasn't just a place to grab a greasy lunch anymore. For a few minutes, it had been a concert hall. It had been a place where magic happened. At the register, Anna rang up the check. It was a modest amount for a steak and coffee. She placed the receipt in a small black book. She also slipped a single napkin inside. On it, with a pen from the counter, she wrote a single word, listen. She walked back to the booth and set the book down. I hope you have a better afternoon, sir, she said. The man stood up. He gathered his briefcase. He looked like he wanted to say more, to offer the money again, or perhaps to ask for her name, but he stopped himself. He realized that sometimes, a moment is just a moment, and you don't get to keep it. You just get to experience it. Thank you, he said. The words were simple, but they felt heavy with meaning. He walked toward the glass doors. He passed the teenagers, who were whispering excitedly about the performance. He passed the old man, who gave him a knowing look. He pushed the door open and walked out into the street. Inside, Anna let out a long breath. She felt lighter, as if she had been carrying a stone around her neck for 3 years and had finally set it down. She looked at the piano in the corner. It was just a dusty old instrument again. But she knew it wasn't really. It was a time machine. It was a bridge to the past and a key to the future. She walked over to the counter where Dave was leaning out of the window, a wide grin on his face. "You okay, kid?" he asked. "Yeah, Dave," she said, and a genuine smile spread across her face. "I think I am." "Good," Dave said. "Because table 7 just asked if you take requests." Anna laughed. It was a real, joyful sound. "Tell them to order dessert first." The afternoon sun shifted, casting long golden beams across the floor. The smell of onions and coffee was still there, but it seemed comforting now, not stifling. The noise of the diner returned to its normal level, but the edges were softer. The harshness was gone. Anna knew she would have to go back to scrubbing floors and worrying about rent tomorrow. She knew life wouldn't magically fix itself just because she played a song. But something inside her had changed. She had touched the keys again, and they had answered her. She had let the music out, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, for a few minutes, it had been beautiful. She picked up a pot of fresh coffee and headed out to the dining room. She walked with her head up, her back straight. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was Anna, the girl who played the piano. And that was enough. As she moved through the tables, refilling cups and chatting with customers who suddenly treated her like an old friend, she realized that the man in the suit had given her a gift, too. He had forced her to remember who she was. He had tried to humiliate her, but he had actually set her free. Outside the window, the city bustled on. Cars honked, people rushed to appointments, and life continued its frantic pace. But inside that small diner, the echo of the melody lingered in the air, a silent reminder that even in the most unexpected places, among the grease and the noise, there is always room for something beautiful to grow. Anna wiped down the counter, humming a soft tune under her breath. It was a new song, one she was making up as she went along. It was simple, and it was sweet. And it was just for her.